Okay. So,
Okay, Marilyn O'Connor from San Juan, Sandy Creel from Orcas.
Mike Pickett from San Juan.
Lincoln Borman, Director.
Amanda Lido, Lopez Island Preserve Steward.
Tanya Williamson, Outreach Volunteer Coordinator.
Sarah DeRoy, Seasonal Field Assistant on Lopez.
that's pretty good. So I hope everybody got the handout that was right there at the door. If you didn't, you can go ahead and pick one up, but we'll also just go through what we're going to be doing for the meeting. If anybody wants to make a comment during this meeting, please sign in on the comment sheet. And if you're not wanting to make a comment, just sign in on the other sheet. And we hope to hear from you. There will be people who are also signing in. There's also people who are signing in online. So we'll be having people speaking in the room and also online. Yes, Kai?
Are comments available to me made written after this meeting?
Yes.
So with the postcard.
Yeah, there's.
Yeah, so the
There's-
question was, can you submit a comment after the meeting? Absolutely. We've got postcards in the back that you can take if something comes to you later. You can email me after the meeting anytime. I think in the meeting notes, it gives a deadline. What we
Yes,
would like comments
September
received.
12th. So I think you all know what the purpose of the meeting is, but just so you know, Lincoln's going to do an overview of the property, the acquisition, when we acquired it, what we paid for it, some of the ecological and cultural features of the property. But our main point in this meeting is to hear from you about what you would like to see out there at Watmough Head. The Land Bank Commission is going to be meeting next Friday. So there's no decisions going to be made at this meeting. We're just really wanting to hear from you. Next Friday, we have our monthly meeting. We'll have this topic as a small part of that meeting. We'll be hearing from BLM at that meeting. And then the following month, we'll be having another meeting in October, and that's when we'll make our final decision. So there's some key issues that we're working on, trying to make some decisions about, and this is what we'd really like to hear from you about. What's the best ownership model to effectively address priority needs for the property? So we're trying to figure out about site management. Who's the best, who could be the best site manager for that property? Some of the access points, how to protect the privacy for the neighbors. What about the Chadwick House? I assume most of you have been out there. So the site has likely the oldest settler's house on the island, 1876. So that's a key issue is, what about the house? What should happen to it? What do you want? And then another key issue is tribal participation. Is there interest in that? We were hoping that we might hear from some of the tribes in this meeting, and if not at this meeting, we're going to make time to have conversations with the tribes.
Are there any tribal people here now? By the way? No. Okay.
So the basic format is Land Bank staff, Lincoln, is going to provide some information, and then we'll have our public comment period. And again, no decisions going to be made. So here's kind of our protocol. Make sure you sign up if you want to comment, either on the chat or in the sign up list. We're going to go through that list in the order of people signing up. Doesn't look like we're going to have so many people. We thought we might have to be really kind of snappy on this, but I think we'll be okay. And again, if you don't want to speak, go ahead and put your comments on the postcards, or you can do that online and you can email Tanya. Stand up if you're speaking in the room, because we have this little thing called the owl. And so we're hoping, so it moves around to find voices. So we're hoping if you stand up that it'll read you. and get you. And if people want to make additional comments, we're going to go through everybody first, and then people can have additional comments if they'd like. And I think that's just about it. So yeah, just asking, please be concise in your comments. And any kind of comments that you want to hand in written by September 12th.
Okay. One note, we would like to go back and forth between online and in person for public comments. So just a heads up for you that if you're waiting, we'll go back and forth and I'll keep a list. Perhaps no one will want to comment online, but just to keep it equitable, sometimes when you're in the room, you feel overlooked in an online meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Lincoln.
All right. So Tanya is going to share her screen.
I gotta get to my, I got distracted there. So I think
Where are you? You're here, right?
yeah. I think it's because maybe you have it on gallery view and you need speaker. Let's try that.
But you're not.
No.
It's showing.
Technical difficulties.
Figuring
Worked
it out.
earlier.
Let's see, because it's only two. Hold on.
Maybe I didn't hit share screen. Hang on. Share screen. There we go.
All right. Can you get to slideshow?
No, sorry.
Uh-oh.
Sorry. How do I go
How is
back?
that happening?
View. Side by side speaker. Is that the right one?
That's good.
And then
Go to slideshow.
here on.
I want to do one more introduction while they're doing that. And I want to introduce Bree, who's our BLM monument manager.
This is the way.
Oh, you're new.
They're gonna be on this side.
I know.
Oh, and Christine, Minnie.
So I have to get.
I would, oh, and actually there's a few other people. So Christine Minnie is the council liaison for the land bank, and she's from San Juan Island, and she's great. And then Doug and Jacob.
Hi, I'm Doug McCutcheon.
Yours is
I'm
different, so I'm
the
gonna-
San Juan Island Preserve Steward.
It's what I do.
with the land bank. I'm Jacob Wagner. I'm the field assistant on San Juan Island.
And then,
I'm Peter Biozay. I'm the preserve steward.
there we go. We needed that extra time.
Great. Well, I'm going to give you a brief overview. A lot of what I'm going to say we have covered in other documents. We have the interim management plan up there if you haven't had a chance to see it. And also our ecological assessment, which was done by Quiot. We have some copies over there as well. I'm just going to give you a general overview of the property and what decisions we have to make. And really, as Peggy said, the goal of this meeting is to hear from all of you about what you think. So we'll do that. We're going to start with a land acknowledgement that we reside on and care for the ancestral lands and waters of the Coast Salish people who have stewarded and called this place home since time immemorial. And we honor inherent Aboriginal and treaty rights that have been passed down from generation to generation.
Sir, did you guys do a pledge of allegiance? Because I got here earlier.
We
don't do that.
do not do a pledge of
Oh,
allegiance.
you just see that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so we're here to talk about this property down there at Watmough Bay, which we're calling Watmough Addition. Others call Watmough Head. There is a Coast Salish place name. I'll spare you my pronunciation, even though I've been working on it. Next slide. The acquisition history of this property began, well, we've known about this property for quite some time. It's really been on everybody's radar for at least a decade or more as something that's very desirable. But the negotiations really started in earnest in mid-2021 when we heard the Higgins family was going to put the property on the market, and continued through that fall. And we closed on the property in February 1st of last year. The purchase price was $2.55 million. An important thing to note, when we do these acquisitions, we have project summaries. And so we put as much information as we can in those project summaries. And in particular, we talk about provisions for managing the property. And if in some cases the commission is wanting to reserve the right to resell the property, that also goes in that project description up front. So in this case, a provision was made for potential resale of the property to the Bureau of Land Management to be part of the National Monument. And that's certainly one of the things that we're going to want to hear from you about. Next slide. Or not.
Next slide.
Well, thank you all for coming. This was-
I think it froze. Hold on.
So
Let's try again.
all right, great. Conservation values. So one of the reasons this has been on our radar for so long is that it has been the last unprotected property out on Watmough Bay. And as you can tell, or you've probably seen photos, it does wrap around from Watmough Bay to the Rosario Strait. So this is a phenomenal property with an extensive shoreline, in particular for how small the property actually is, 11.5 acres. It has over 2,000 feet of shoreline, including some pocket beaches. And this whole area is a priority for salmon recovery. We also know that there has been long-term, very long-term use of this property by indigenous people. And there's a historic reef net fishing site right at the bottom of the slide there. Actually, you can see probably where it is, where it used to be. You can see that line of bull kelp, hard to make out, but probably where the reef net site was. There's an extensive midden on the property as well. And then in 1876, Sampson Chadwick homesteaded this property, or that's an approximate date, and constructed the cabin that's down there now in pieces. One of the other reasons that this was an important acquisition for us is the strong potential for low intensity recreation. Next slide. So some of the environmental attributes, a lot of this is about the shoreline and near shore and how important it is. So you can see Watmough Bay proper there and the beach. And you can see the property on the right-hand side and those two pocket beaches. So we've got eelgrass beds, forage fish spawning sites, bull kelp, documented Chinook and other salmon species in this area. Next slide. And this is the context. So you can see where the National Monument properties are. Those are in the brownish color. And then our existing properties prior to the purchase are in green. Also, you can see the conservation easement areas adjacent to the property. So as you can tell, this was the last unprotected piece and of critical importance.
Are you talking about the road easement into the property? When you said
Conservation easements.
who owns that road easement?
So we're talking about the conservation easements on adjacent properties. Some of those are held by the San Juan Preservation Trust. The one immediately adjacent, immediately west of this property is held by us, by the land bank on the Geeling property. That dotted line, as you see, we'll come back to this.
Is that the easement road?
Gary.
I'm just asking.
It is
that
not,
the easement
that,
road?
that is not the easement road. The easement road curves around to the south, and we'll discuss that a little bit later.
Is it in the picture?
It's
Hey,
right,
Gary, let's let
Just show me
the,
where it is so I can see it. Thank
it's
you.
right here.
Thank you.
Next slide. All right, as I mentioned, there is a place name for Watmough Bay. And you can go to the website that the Samish have created and hear how it's pronounced, rather than listening to me botch it. Obviously, there's a long history of the place has been named before, and we have that record. It's fairly clear that this has been in people's consciousness for a long time. Next slide. So this is from our ecological assessment. One of the things they did, Quiot, that is, was to do a kind of cursory look at the surface of the property and look to see where there are shells distributed and ash. And this is a map of those locations. So the midden extends over a large part of the property, certainly that central part where the homestead is a key feature also for the midden and for Native American use over time. Next slide. Just I thought I'd throw a drawing up there of reef netting and how the operation actually worked. Not going to go through it with you, but you just get a sense of how that operation generally happened. And we do know there was a reef net site off the east side of this property. Next slide. So moving on in time, if we look at the land use in the settlement era, starting in 1876, you can see these areas in color, which are colored, were either cleared for fields or for an orchard. That green area is the orchard that exists today. You can see the cabin there on the left-hand side of the slide, not all the way. All the way left is actually on the Geeling property off of this property. So next slide. This is 1932 aerial. Sorry, this is as clear as it gets, but you can still see the orchard on the property from 1932. Some of the other details. Next slide. And this is the 2022 aerial. So a lot of that is still in place and has been for quite some time. Next slide. Okay, so we have some decisions that we need to make. And the big one really is whether the land bank will retain ownership of the property or will resell it to BLM. Before we talk about those, I think it's important to recognize that whoever owns it between these two agencies, there is likely to be some commonalities in how the property is managed. Public access almost certainly will be a feature regardless of ownership. Accommodating tribal use of the property is something that will be important to both organizations. So periodic canoe journey visits, things like that. We don't know exactly what form that will take, but it's going to be important to us to recognize the tribal history and allow some access for them from time to time. Control of invasives, certainly we'll be working on that. And then there's a potential for ecological restoration. So whoever owns it, I think you can count on these kinds of things happening. Next slide. Here's the public access potential, and this is what we envision. It is a trail going from the existing Watmough parking area to the property. It's basically in existence now, even though the property is not open for public use currently. This appears to be the best way for us to access the property. There is a private road easement to the south, which does access this property. However, that's very problematic for us to use as a public access point. We've been through this on San Juan, actually, where we had a dispute over use of a private road easement. And one of the issues here is if we were to use that private road easement for public access, then you could not actually continue on and go back to the Watmough parking area. That would be overburdening the easement, as we learned in our foray into the legal system. So we determined that this trail really seems like the best possible way to get to the property. So people would come and go via that trail. Next slide. And here's just the trail, existing trailhead and the beach at Watmough Bay with a photo looking out toward this property. Next slide. Here's the westernmost beach on the property. Next slide. So one of the things that we do need to take into consideration is the financial aspect. And our choices really are retaining the property. We have obtained some state grants to help offset the cost of acquisition. That would basically reimburse us for 1.5 million of the total cost. So it would mean the land bank will have committed $1 million approximately to the acquisition. We would also have the overall management costs and infrastructure costs to deal with if we retain the property. If we resold the property, we would recover all of our acquisition costs, which we would then use for additional conservation projects. We would incur the cost of infrastructure removal, and we'll talk about that here in just one short bit. Next slide. So the Chadwick cabin is a principal issue with this property. Obviously, it has historic significance. It's not in tremendous condition. We have determined that putting it on a foundation, it's not on a foundation at all. It's on some rocks, basically, and really in pretty shaky condition. For us to put that on a foundation would be exorbitantly expensive. And also because it is on the existing shell midden would be quite complicated to do. So we don't think that's an option, even if we retain the property. We potentially could retain the structure. I don't know how it would be used. It would not be used as a residence. Next slide. So retaining it is possible if we retain ownership. Probably we'd be seeking partnerships to help keep up the house going forward. Maybe try and do some restoration on it, but it's a difficult proposition in that regard. If we were to resell the property to BLM, they would have a requirement that we remove the cabin one way or the other. We don't think that moving it is really an option. It's not in good enough condition to actually transport it and getting it down that road or off the beach. It just seems like that's not really possible. And so the building would have to be taken down if we are going to resell to the DLM. That's kind of the summary of where we are with the property. And now, you know, this is your part of the meeting. So we're looking to hear from you what you think about the property in general and about the decisions that we have in front of us. That's it.
Thank you.
So, thanks, Lincoln. So a reminder, anybody who wants to speak here in the room, please sign up on the sheet. And I guess we need to bring that sheet up here.
I have a copy of it.
Okay. And then we're going to alternate between online and in the room. So, but we're going to go in the order of people signing up.
I just have a question.
Oh, good.
Will there be a time, not in public comments, where we can ask questions?
Yes.
So let me know, I
I
have
would-
a question, but let me know when a good time to ask questions would be.
Well, I would suggest that you do it as part of your comment.
Okay, thanks.
How's that?
Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're happy to answer questions as they come up,
If we can.
if we can, right?
So,
I have one person online who has a comment. Do you want to start online?
sure.
Okay. So Amy,
Okay.
if you would like, oh, she's got a perfect hand up and everything. If you want to go ahead and unmute, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Amy Frost. I'm the director of the Lopez.
For a
Can you hear
minute.
me?
Amy, hold on. You're very
Sure.
quiet. We're trying to hear you.
Okay.
Verify that we are as loud as we can be.
It looks like there is a separate speaker for the owl. Hold on. So many things.
We try again.
Sure. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Oh, poop.
I don't think she's coming through the owl.
Okay.
Sounds like it's coming from the projector.
Okay, I'm gonna go back and forth here. Will you try again, Amy?
Yeah. How about now? Okay. Yay. For those of you who don't already know me, I'm Amy Frost, and I'm the director of the Lopez Island Historical Museum. I heard from Krista Campbell last week about this issue, and it has pretty much preoccupied me ever since. The Chadwick house, the Chadwick homestead, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that I think the most important voice here, because of the antiquity of the Coast Salish habitation there, I feel like the tribes probably should have the loudest voice about what happens to the house should the land bank choose to keep it. The Chadwicks represent some of the earliest settlers on Lopez. As far as I can tell, it is literally the oldest building still standing on Lopez. It is also the only historic house that is on public property and available for interpretation. And in my mind, the house tells a very important story. Adelia Chadwick was half Squalum. She was born at Dungeness. She was the daughter of Charles Bradshaw, who is an important figure in Washington state history. She was born in 1859. So she represents the first generation of people who were born as a product of the contact between settlers and Native people in the area. And then all of her children also represent that very complicated and important narrative and history. The family lived at that property, 3 generations of them, for almost exactly 100 years. And then after the last grandchild that lived on the property, it passed into the Higgins family, in part because the Higgins had helped the Chadwicks during the Depression. They had given them a tractor to use, is the story that I have been told. The Lopez Island Historical Society board had a meeting this last Wednesday, and we voted, or the trustees rather, voted to support the land bank in taking care of this house, should you decide to keep the property. We think that it's really an important part of the Lopez story, and that it would be very short-sighted and a shame to just knock it down without fully exploring what could be done and how it could be used to tell those important stories. I wrote something up, but maybe I'll just try and speak it instead. We sort of decided that we should talk about what kind of vision we would have. I have already looked into some Washington State Historic Preservation grants that could potentially be secured to help with the house. Not that any of that would be easy, and we certainly would need the support of the community to do that. And like I said, the major caveat for me is that the tribes really should have a say in whether or not the house stays, because it is sitting on a shell midden. And that location was traditionally, was a traditional reef net site and duck netting site. And so there's, very important cultural meaning there as well. And descendants of people who owned those reef netting sites are now at the Samish and the Swinomish tribes. And they are, families, they're real people who have connections. And they're also Chadwick family descendants who are still alive and have an important tie to this house. But as well, many generations of Lopesians who are alive today have very strong heart connections to this place. And like I said, I think it would be very short-sighted to just knock the house down without taking that into consideration. And frankly, don't particularly think it would be wise of the BLM to take that course of action without really bringing the community into that decision. But we sort of envision a place. There used to be, historically, you can see it behind me. This is the Chadwick house before the chimney was taken down. And you can see that there was a picket fence around one end of it. So one thought we had is that that could be reconstructed without digging into the shell midden anymore. And interpretation could be there. We could have volunteers that came on the weekends to show people the house. I think there are a lot of possibilities, and I think that it would really, I think it could really bring the community together around Lopez history and provide a really beautiful place for us all to honor that history, both native and settler, and the ways in which they interact. And I'm going to call it there because I don't want to take up all the time. If anybody has a question for me, please.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah.
So, okay. Now we'll move on to somebody in the room.
No, please. Or no, we need to leave it on.
We need to leave it on. Okay. So if you want to if you're in the room and you want to give a public comment, there is a sign-up sheet. But we'll get started. Russell Barsher.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm speaking as a member of the eco assessment team, and going beyond the eco assessment to the implications that the land bank now has to consider in the fate of the site. So we spent a lot of time there and also investigated the cultural history of the site, as well as the current ecological conditions there. We strongly believe that you can only understand what's there today by understanding how people have modified, lived in, utilized a place over time. And I would have to say, as a summary of what we learned in our time Watmough Head, Huachunkpun, was that yes, it's extraordinarily scenic. I can't say there were many comparable sites around Lopez. Yes, it has importance to the salmon. We've been seining and collecting data on outbound juvenile Chinook salmon at the beach at Watmough since 2008. We have a very long data set on the role of the bay as a Chinook salmon nursery. It is a critical nursery, and Watmough Head's shorelines are part of that larger bay seascape. But what struck us as most important, the most extraordinary and precious dimension of this site was its cultural history. The fact that it's been occupied for, we estimate, at least 2,000 years based on the archaeology at Watmough Bay, the archaeological site on the beach, which I was a co-PI on excavating in 2004. The Chadwick history is just the most recent episode. A very important part of it with the people that I know was the reef net. Perhaps 1,800 years of reef netting there, based again on the archaeology. The most recent traditional owners of the site, Houghton, or Harry Samish as he was known, was the great-grandfather of the founder of our laboratory, Ken Hansen. And one of his descendants lives on this island. The other traditional owner was Edwards Chia, and his descendants are living in Swinomish now. And we know them. And as Amy said, these are real people, real families. It's not just tribal in the sense of a flag and an identity card and a tribal office. This is a site which living families and some people who live on Lopez reef netted within the last century and have strong ties to and lots of stories. So to reinforce what Amy had just said, this is certainly a challenge, but it's a huge opportunity for interpretation and for cooperation and collaboration between islanders who are here on Lopez today and the tribal families that have links to Lopez Island and the rest of the Salmon Islands, and who in many cases are still here quietly and discreetly, but have the stories that go beyond the stories of European settlers that changed its name from Huachunkpun to Watmough. The question that I have in my mind is whether any other agency other than the land bank would have the resources to do what would be needed to take care of this place, even without the building, because the archaeological site is going to be there even if the building is removed. And the stories are still attached to that place, even if the building is removed. We have some experience with this. We've been working at Indian Island on Orcas, serving as the on the ground, the land stewards around that island since the BLM invited us to do that in 2009. It's an ongoing working relationship with the Bureau of Land Management that involves a culturally significant and biologically significant site. So similar to the situation at Watmough Head. The tribal governments have been in the background. The tribal families we've been in touch with all along. The critical issue that we faced repeatedly has been not the willingness of the Bureau of Land Management to work with us, with the tribes, with the community of Orcas, and to address the cultural issues associated with that site, it's been resources. It's been limitations on personnel and dollars and issues of policies that have thus far made it impossible to give that site the protection and, more importantly, the interpretive clout that it could have. Now, it's an evolving situation, and I'm very hopeful now, working with Bree and with the personnel of BLM, that we will eventually have an extraordinary cultural and biological opportunity at East Sound. But the house is falling down, and people are going out to Watmough Head with or without it being public and open. It needs protection now. And the people, the families that have connections to Watmough should be brought into the conversation now, not in several years. So now, it seems to me, the land bank is in the best position to do the best job that we can. And with partners like the Historical Museum, and frankly, we would continue to want to be involved and bring our resources to the extent we could to the table. And our connections with the tribes, because we collaborate with a number of the tribes on scientific projects. So we work with natural resources departments and TIPOs that have connections to Lopez and to the rest of the islands. We would be very interested in seeing this as again, a collaboration, not just on preservation of ecological or biological values, but a collaboration on cultural and historical interpretation that might be one of the first bridges between tribal families and islanders. That's real. That's not just, if I may be excused to say so, a land acknowledgement at the beginning of the meeting. So I would argue that the land bank has the community base, the political support in the community, the resources, the personnel, by far more personnel, to deal with this now. And that unloading it to any other agency would probably be a bad idea and would lose San Juan County and Lopez the opportunity that this site affords. And again, just to conclude, we would be one of the nonprofits that would happily work on getting the resources and building and maintaining the tribal relationships to make it an exceptional interpretive site.
Thanks, Russell. Okay,
Juana, do you have anyone online that wants to comment?
No other online.
no one online. So our next
Okay.
person.
No one's online going to comment, so Larry Cochran, you're up.
Hi, I'm Larry Cochran. My family came here in 1883. We've lived on this island ever since. I knew the Humeses very well. I interviewed Addie Chadwick for a paper I did in college. That was 50 years ago. Kenneth Humes taught me how to shoot sheep. I've done that for over 50 years. What strikes me is this represents basically the very first contact with indigenous people and the European people coming in here. Chadwick has affiliations with Hudson's Bay Company. Ken told me that that was his grandfather, rode and took a boat all the way around Lopez and around south into San Juan to go to English camp to trade, because that's where his affiliations were. It's really, I knew them. I was there. I ate at their home. I worked with Ken. I shared people. This island has changed so much. And one reason it's like it is now still, that you're coming here, is because of what happened. Because of people like the Hugheses and the Chadwicks that stayed here and kept it from being overdeveloped. That property has been in that family over 100 years, almost 150 years. I think that the land bank, and I can't say that I've been a huge fan all the time, but they're here. They're in this county. We can talk to them. I can talk to him. We don't have to agree, but we can have a dialogue. BLM is wherever they are. They have vast properties all over the United States to try to manage and take care of. We can focus on San Juan County. We can focus on Lopez Island. And I think that I'm also a member of the Historical Society, part of the board. And I'm very proud to be there because my heritage, I've lived here all my life. My grandfather was born here. My dad was born here. And I was born here on this island by midwives who took care of us. My son was born on, my oldest son was born on San Juan Island, and his son was born on San Juan Island. So we have a really strong connection here. And it's very important to me. I'm 78 years old, and I've been here all the time. And I've watched this change, and it changes. And I like a lot of you folks. But all these people that come create problems. They create things that are hard for us to deal with. And if we let this go away, I think I would really like to see that house preserved as much as it can. Maybe not on the midden. I've been in construction here. We have built houses on middens at Flat Point, for instance. Sometimes we had to get approval. It took months to do because we had to see if it was going to be, if there was anything really that what historical artifacts in there that were didn't want need to be disturbed beyond. But if you go around the whole perimeter of Lopez Island, you're going to find middens everywhere because they caught their fish. They came in and ate them on the beach with sea urchins, whatever they were doing. They went to the closest protected place that they could camp, and that's where they did, and they did it for hundreds and hundreds of years. So there, I'm not downplaying that, by the way. I respect the people very much. When I was a kid going up there, there were still lots of I don't know how to put this diplomatically, but there were Indian children who were like part Indian. There were quite a few of them around. I wasn't even aware of it because there was no cultural difference there. They were part of the culture that I was living in, and it wasn't pointed out to me, oh, they're part Indian. It was never pointed out to me. I didn't even know a lot of it until I became an adult. So, we had a good experience here as a kid growing up, and it was very important to me. And I think that we have to, this home represents, like I said, 150 years of continuous ownership by the same family. It really gets, there's no other place like that. Because in the 60s, we all cut up the farms and sold them off, and all of you came. And so, because we couldn't make a go of it. Farming was not, and that was basically the only thing that was going on here. I don't know what's more to say, except that, I come up here kind of with my heart on my sleeve a little bit, because it's really important. The history of this island has been something I've had a passion with since I was a child. I loved going to 4th of July picnic and sitting down and listening to the old boys sitting around, spinning yarns. The other kids were out playing on the beach and stuff, and I was sitting there tucked in a corner listening to these guys because it's my heritage, it's my culture. And, maybe it's not some of your culture, folks' culture yet, but it will be when your kids grow up and live here and whatever, you're going to become more involved in the community. Let yourself get in here, dive into the community, and this is a great opportunity for you to do that. Not only with your money, but with your, get out there and help us move this house if we have to. Help help the land bank raise money, do the things that we need to do. So I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate the comments we're having so far, and I'm also going to want people to be as succinct as possible because I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak. So thank you to everybody who has spoken. That's not meant as a criticism, but I want people to be really focused.
Jean Helfman.
Jean.
Thank you. First, I want to once again comment about what a wonderful acquisition this piece is, and I congratulate the land bank for the tremendous effort they put into it and what they've been doing since with coming up with the management plan. But I am concerned about the possible sale of the property to BLM. At a recent land bank meeting, several people from Lopez spoke very strongly in opposition to turning that property over to BLM because of the loss of control over the activities that would occur there. BLM could allow camping and worse because of their policies of maximal use. It would increase fire danger, pollution, damage to the Chadwick House, all sorts of problems. I've been a BLM monitor for over a decade, and I've counted as many as 100 people on the beach on a summer weekend. So the land bank can control overuse of the property, and BLM can't and probably wouldn't. And I've been on the BLM Monument Advisory Committee for 2 terms and counted as, and BLM basically ignored the advice we gave them. They ignored the comments of over 1,000 people about the management plan. So BLM has proven unresponsive to the local community, and the land bank, in contrast, tends to be responsive because their continued existence is dependent on the goodwill of the people. In the last vote on reauthorization, it was Lopez that put the land bank over the top to continue to exist. And so I guess what I'm saying is, given a strong sentiment within the Lopez community about turning this property over to BLM and therefore losing control of it, why is it that the land bank is so willing to lose the goodwill of the Lopez community? Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. Next, we have Asha Leela.
So first off, I want to thank Tom Allen for his exquisite, excellent idea of creating the ability to have the land bank. Because without his idea, we wouldn't do it. Thanks, Tom. So I want to thank the land bank for buying this piece of land and also by asking us what we want. I, for one, am adamant that this property be in local control. It's our history, it's our land, and should not be at the whim of elections or federal agencies. I wasn't going to speak in extension about BLM land, but now that I understand that this meeting is centered on that topic. As many of you know, I worked for the BLM for 30 years, and I was part of the reason we have a monument. My committee was part of the reason we have a monument. The monument was set up so that there would not be development on the lands that were still vacant. And it was set up to conserve the land and open it up to other people to enjoy it. Supposedly us, because we love to hike and we love to be in that part of our island. But the BLM, when it's when it's paying attention and going on your side, where you feel like you can move forward, it's great. But when it's in hard places, is the BLM works. I worked for it for 30 years, and we resigned 2 years ago. And you have to go from Lopez to Spokane to Oregon to Washington, D.C., and now to Colorado to have decisions made. And those decisions are financial decisions, they're personnel decisions, decisions that take a lot of time and may not really reflect what this community wants. And so that's why I'm feeling very strongly that at this, for history, for our Lopez history that we love and we want to pay attention to, this is for the land bank. And we feel very, I have my love for the BLM, but I see its problems. And one of the problems that they have that's really huge is the parking area. And I have given for 10 years ideas to all those agencies levels of how to fix this. Good idea, I think, that would serve Watmough and Watmough and perhaps the land bank. How to have a parking lot that would serve all that area and not, and there's nothing been done for years. So that's just sort of an auxiliary example of the slowness and the well, I don't know, all of it. I don't even need to go into it. We're all here because the land bank has a very special place and reverence by Lopesians. And the land bank, the Higgins land is a special place and reverence by Lopesians. And the land bank has proven over the years that it is sensitive and responsible to those who live here. So I'm thanking you for all taking this on and hoping that all will work out for the land's advantage. This piece holds our whole known history, as Amy said, the tribal use, the long years since the pioneer time, and currently even there's coming of age ceremonies out there. And so it's our present history too. I personally can foresee that partnerships would be great for the land and perhaps for the land bank. For the land bank and the museum and the Samish tribe probably could all benefit working together in partnership for best results. These days, it's really hard to do something alone. So partnerships, I feel like, is where we're moving forward in this community even more so. So if we can't save and know and honor our history, who are we as Lopez and who are we as Lopesians?
Thank you, Asha. Nancy McCoy. After Nancy is Madrona.
Hi. First of all, I would like to commend the land bank for their extensive work they've done and completed already in regard to this property acquisition. I am just totally impressed with the studies you've made, and I want to commend you for that. I also want to make a note that in your latest mailing, there's a page about your mandates. And the first phrase reads, to preserve in perpetuity areas in the county that have environmental, agricultural, aesthetic, cultural, scientific, historic, scenic, and low-intensity recreational. So I'm particularly interested in historic, being the first Lopez Museum director and have worked at the museum for 24 years and am very familiar with the Chadwick property. Also, I've been involved with historic preservation all those years and continue to be. I was on a small committee years ago to save the San Juan County Courthouse. The county commissioners voted twice to demolish the building. Unfortunately, they never voted to spend any money on demolition. And so it just stood there. And then finally we gave it a cosmetic facelift for a grant and people could actually visualize what it could be. Also, I was involved with the restoration of Fort Stanley School, which had been empty 60 years. And one of our board members the historical board members, Glennis Bennett, when we were walking through the building, actually dropped 3 feet through the floor. Fortunately, she was unharmed, but it gave us a big scare. Anyway, that building, I think, was in far worse condition than the Chadwick House. And it was salvaged and received a state award for its historic preservation after we got through with it. And we did it all with most of it, with building salvage. I mean, I was the salvage queen. I knew every restore and, salvage store in Seattle, Bellingham. And my little truck put on a lot of miles picking up materials. And anyway, I want to urge the preservation of the Chadwick House. I believe strongly it is eligible for the National Register. And it really tells a story of the isolation in the early days of early contact on the island and early settlement. Chadwick had a boat that's just across the street over here, a little clinker-built boat that was believed to have been taken from a British sailing ship when sailors jumped ship. And he used that boat to row to Anacortes, probably the English camp. And it's thanks to Donald Stiff and a friend, the boat was put back together enough that we could display it and tell its story. And there are many artifacts in the museum pertaining to the Chadwick family. And I think that, I know the house is an attractive nuisance as it is now. It's still isolated after all these years. The area around is not lived in full time. And so there really needs to be a presence there. And I've been a volunteer with the BLM Lighthouse program, where I go out to Peytos camp at my old age, hauling all my supplies. And it's, I think it might be one possibility, that or setting up a temporary, or, some smaller utility housing for volunteers to be out there. I think people would sign up for years, like the Dungeness Lighthouse. They've got a waiting list for years, and people pay money to stay at Dungeness. And, there is nothing better than to see the sun rise up behind Mount Baker in the evening at Chadwick, or to have a morning coffee sitting next to the wood cook stove in that kitchen.
Nancy, I'm going to ask you.
Okay, anyway.
There's other people who want to speak.
Oh, I could go on for hours.
I know.
Peggy, we have
Thank you.
8 more, so we are gonna.
Oh, we're okay.
Madrona and then Sandy.
So Madrona, speaking both as a botanist who works on the eco assessment and also as a lifelong Lopesian or Lopezan. I very much appreciate the acquisition of this property for the community. And I think that is really where it comes down to me, the importance of having the land bank continue to retain ownership is the community connection and accountability. That you're local, you're here, and you kind of have to listen to us. and you do, and I appreciate that. It's a fascinating property because it represents long-term living history. I mean, I spent time in that house as a kid, that, you know, I go hang out with the Johnson's kids. It has a landscape that people have been using and that is still used. In terms of recreation, it's a really wonderful possibility because it's a landscape that has been used by people. It's not, and they're not left alone, so that people can continue to use this landscape without threatening things that maybe need a little bit more of a hands-off approach. It has a historic orchard. I would love to work with you to make that orchard thrive and continue to be something people can enjoy. So it's not even just the house as a historic landscape, it's the house, it's the orchard, it's that whole property that people have created through thousands of years of use. And so I urge you to think of it as this living landscape. And yeah, you know, people using a land is always challenging. That's something that you've proven up to being able to look after landscapes that have complicated human uses. And also, you know, you can ask for help. This community loves this land and wants to help you take care of it. So I look forward to the land bank retaining ownership. I look forward to coming up with creative solutions that make that easier and more affordable for you. And I'm glad you're doing this. So thank you.
Thanks, Madrona. Who's next?
Sandy.
Sandy's next.
Okay, Peggy, in honor of you asking me to be brief, I'm gonna try and really be brief. First of all, I really appreciate your process, and I really love that the land bank stepped up and made all that work with the purchase. So wanted to say that. I think that the land bank should hold it always, no sale outside the land bank, and keep it locally controlled. I really agree with Asha. Partnerships are important in terms of historical museum partnering. If the house is really going to be saved, I'm not really in favor of the land bank taking that on their own, just in terms of, you know, who's got resources. I think that the overburdened Watmough Bay there and the parking, it's a really bad idea to have a year-round open trail from that over to Watmough. I would prefer that if that trail was going to be open, that it only be open in the off-season. And really important to have tribal involvement here. I think that it's important for research, that place. I like the idea of an on-site caretaker, and at one point I wondered about, you know, a simple house located somewhere. But I really like Nancy's idea as well of having some people being invited to stay there and keep an eye on things. Let's see. Oh, the focus on salmon recovery, the ability to close off the trail if need be. And that's it.
Well done, Sandy.
Karen and then Tracy.
Who's next?
Karen.
I can't throw it on the button. Hi, I'm Karen Holm. As my family became part stewards of Watmough Head when I was 3 years old, I remember Larry as a teenager shearing sheep with Kenneth. I spent many years, since it was 1965, when our family became connected with that area, with the Humes, with their sheep. I remember when the little sheep were born and I would think they were mine. I got plenty, but I really appreciate all the voices today. Russell, I really appreciate your ecological connection and your tribal connection. Larry, I really appreciate your historical view. Sandy and Nancy and just all the different views. I appreciate the people who have stewarded that land over the years. Originally the Coast Salish, the Chadwicks, the extended to the Humes, the Johnsons, who kept that property really beautiful for a lot of years and didn't impact it in a way that took away from that place. And I think acknowledging their stewardship is important, and then the land bank taking that on as recognizing all the parts of that are super important. I appreciate that you guys have thought about the impact of people coming in and how that works. That road is crazy. My 94-year-old mom, she wasn't driving, was backing up today with my nephew who just got his driver's license. Well, another vehicle. It's a difficult place. So there's a lot of challenges in this. I want to say that our family really feels strongly that the land bank, it keeps a local connection. You are listening to what people are saying and taking that on as important. Thank you.
I don't know where I should stand. And we do have a tribal member here I would like to introduce. Patty Gobin, who we get to work with through the National Monument. So thank you. I'm Tracy Cottingham. I am a current member on the Monument Advisory Committee. I'm not here representing them today, but my position is cultural and heritage. And I'm a longtime Lopesian. And I do want to point out, before I forget, we do have a Monument Advisory meeting, September 27th. Bree will be there speaking about the potential for how this all may come to be, and you can speak to that a little bit. But there will be 10 o'clock, September 27th, a Zoom meeting. It will be listed in Lopez Rocks for that Zoom link, and 12 o'clock will be public comments. Sorry, Sarah. But I would like to, for anyone that hasn't followed this process, it's been remarkable to see Lincoln in action, to work all aspects of how do we save this land, not just from the county level. He was acting as if, how do we partner with all the possibilities, with San Juan Preservation, with the owners that sold it, what sort of conservation easement could there be, with the Conservation Lands Foundation, right? To potentially get the funding long before BLM might have access to it. So his brilliant work allowed this to happen and bring these voices together early on, when it was just so great that Land Bank had the resources to secure it and had the support of the locals. To get those grants is no easy feat. San Juan County is so lucky to have the land bank that has matching funds to secure $1.5 million in grants given to us to do this. That means the land bank only has 1 million remaining. Think of that in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. That will seem like not very much money. So if the land bank can hold this, there's no reason you should consider selling it. If in the future there was the horrible situation where the REIT tax does not go forward, then that's a different situation. But currently, the strength of this property to help us pass the next levy, which is going to be on the ballot in 2024, to get another 12 years or so of this, this property gives us such a strength to make that happen. If we sell it before that time, there's a negative in my mind that we have taken tax funding, used it to secure land, and then sold it. That's not really what the land bank's about, even if you've worked that into the sale. So the other piece is we are just so lucky to have all this partnership to use. The land bank already has the south side of Watmough you're managing. This is a continuation of that. The hunting would most likely be allowed through the entire hunting season if it's turned over to BLM. That's in a current management plan for all of our properties. Whereas the land bank can restrict hunting to a shorter period. That's a benefit. So with that, the land bank can hold it as a quieter preserve. We've seen that in other properties. that it isn't something that needs to be heavily publicized on the maps. And I think it's a great addition to adjacent lands that are national monument to keep this with the land bank. Kudos on those grants. I would hate to see them not accepted.
Thank you, Tracy. So we have 4 more people, and also Patty, I just want to welcome you. You got here a little later. But I had said earlier that we welcome your comments now, and we also want to make an opportunity for tribal input and discussion at a separate time as well. So perhaps at the next Land Bank Commission meeting or something. But anyway, we've got you on our list. I think our next speaker is.
Yeah, so there's 4 more. It'll be Gary Franco and then Charlie Bookman.
Yes, good morning.
Okay, and I'm going to watching the time. Good, thank you.
Do we have county commissioners?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Welcome. And, oh, one?
Just one. One on.
Anyone know where ours is?
Christine is our liaison with the land bank,
Right.
and so Jane was not able to make it.
Because it's, you know, for most productive class, it's an odd hour, 10:30, because people are keeping this show going. It needs to happen, otherwise we're in deep trouble. But anyway, I so enjoyed comments, and you know, Larry, one of my great regrets, and it was brought back, was I got here in November 15, 74, and I missed the last Humes. I never met the Humes. And, but I've known that place, and it's very special to our culture, our history, who we really are. Thank you for that great talk. And to the, I guess, Mr. Borman, who owns the easement road, which is about half a mile to the Humes place? Who owns that easement?
It's a private road, and the easement is held by the property owners who are serviced by that road.
And are we the people of Lopez property owners?
We own one of the properties that is served by the road.
Good. So that's an access road available to us. I just drove down it today, by the way. That road by law is available to our use, correct? Or if not correct, why not correct?
By law, it could be.
Could be.
We,
You've had this for a couple of years. You should know. There's no coulds. Is it or isn't it?
it's a question of whether we would choose to use that as our access.
Well, we the people choose to use that as our access, especially for walking. I'm not a big car fan, but it's one of the most beautiful walks in San Juan County. And Madam Commissioner, we own that property. We pay for that property by shifting taxes, which you folks are getting very clever at. Shifting taxes off those who can most afford it to the rest of us who can least afford it, which is similar to having a meeting when the productive class can't be here. I've been watching this develop for years. And
Gary,
Madam
let's stay on
Commissioner-
focus, okay?
Oh, I am. What do you mean by that?
Well, I want you to talk about this piece of property.
So, Madam Commissioner, it's our property. You're the boss. We elected you to be the boss. Make that a park for all of us to enjoy. Have you been to that property?
No, sir.
Please go. And before you get there, there's a little beach place that it goes right by my place. And it's very inspiring because a lot of local folks go down there and enjoy it. So I get to hear the laughter and such. But it's a little bit of a beach with steps that are totally dangerous. The county's known about it for years. It just doesn't have the money to fix that up. Well, anyway, we've had this for 2 summers. Our children, the moms, the dads, the grandmas, grandpas, the working class, people who live here, could have been enjoying those beaches and enjoying that property. And that's what it's all about, because they serve at your pleasure, you serve at our pleasure. You are our public servant, thank you very much. And we want you to serve us for the good of the whole, not the good of the few. There's 4 absentee landlords that live down there. No one lives down there.
Hi, Gary.
Yes.
I'm from home.
No, I know, and I appreciated your
I've lived there for
talk.
many years, full-time and sometimes with some
I like what
money.
you said.
So I just want you to know we're not absentee. We have family on the island that are here all the time.
Not full time.
And I'm Rob Walker, I'm
Yeah.
Karen's partner. You should know
Yeah,
me.
but not full
I'm
time.
also-
Hey, you guys.
The people I'm
Sorry.
talking about,
I just had to.
Yeah,
make
no, I
this
think-
economy work. Not the part-timers who get the tax breaks, because people down there, check it out, those 4 people who are down there
Gary?
pay a fraction of the taxes that we, the people, do.
Hey, Gary,
And you have to look into these things
Gary,
and serve us, Madam Commissioner, please. Thank you.
thank you, Gary. Okay, Charles, our next person.
Charles Bookman, brief comments from the standpoint of someone who's worked in the public sector planning and managing programs. This is a very ambitious purchase. I want to thank the land bank for thinking ambitiously. And I hope that you continue to think ambitiously in 2 areas. One is public access. I second the comments about the road. Think of the young parents, maybe kids in strollers, a wilderness trail. Much as I love a wilderness trail, I walk wilderness trails all the time, but there is a transportation issue between Watmough, Colville, and this new property. Think ambitiously about solving a summertime transportation problem. I've seen the improvements made in other land bank properties. I just walked down to the one on the west side of Lopez the other day. Nice little parking lot. Think ambitiously about 3 public access points and the transportation needs for public access for old people, young people. Don't just think wilderness trail, please.
Yes.
Secondly, historic preservation. I was gobsmacked when I read in one of the preparatory materials that a sale to BLM would involve tearing down or moving the oldest property on Lopez Island. This is the same agency that is responsible for historic preservation designations at the national level. Please pursue this further. There's been abundant comments about the importance of historic preservation at this meeting, and think ambitiously about the partnerships that are going to help you get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rhea.
First of all, I want to thank you, wrong earrings for a man, for your presentation. It was concise and comprehensive. That's great. I want to remind you that it was only because of Lopez that we have the land bank right now. Because the last election that we were involved in, Lopez is the one that turned the tide so that the county voted to keep the land bank.
Too bad.
So when we talk about the vulnerability with BLM, I just want to remind us that the land bank is also a vulnerable institution. And it's incumbent on all of us who do support the land bank to get out there and make sure the other islands understand the significance of the land bank. Secondly, I want to say that I also have been a member of the National Monument Advisory Committee. I've been very involved, whether I've been on the committee or not on the committee. And it broke my heart to find out what it means to work with the Bureau of Land Management. In the prior administration, we almost lost many significant public lands in this country. And because of that, I have seen damage happening out at Iceberg Point because we could get no progress whatsoever, no funding, no resources from the Bureau of Land Management to take care of our existing public lands. And I remember when the report came back to be signed, that would allow camping to go unhindered on public lands. I asked the director, who is a really good friend of mine, who signed that document? She said, I did. And I said, why? And said, because I lose my job if I didn't. That's the kind of top-down pull over and power over local control from the Bureau of Land Management. So I have to say, as much as I enjoy Bree and the work now that we finally have somebody hands-on on these lands, that it makes it even more vulnerable to me than the land bank. I also want to say that I was very involved with Rocky Mountain National Park in my youth. And I remember pretty much camping wherever I wanted and driving up to Bear Lake and camping over the Continental Divide more than once. And now I can't get to Bear Lake without going on a shuttle, just because, folks, there's too many of us. Babies still being born. So I don't know if it's going to be a time when we need to start thinking in terms of permits on utilizing some of the lands here. I hate to say that, but I've seen how important it is to do permitting. I also want to say I really applaud the work that's going on with the land bank, between the land bank and the tribes. And I certainly appreciate your leadership, Abby, in working with us, lowly ones out here. And I would love to support an active presence of tribal representatives. And as much as I appreciate the name of the Watmough Bay, I know there's more than one. I know there are 52 Salish communities that work in the area here, and we just need to be a little bit careful about which one we emphasize and which one we don't emphasize. And oh, I do love that caretaking cabin. I've had many intimate moments in it. If there's any way at all to keep it, especially now that I know it combines not only the white community, but the indigenous Indian community, Native community here, I think that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Patty, are you interested in speaking? If you'd like to speak,
Well,
we welcome you.
I want to be very careful. I don't have any band-aids or anything for my neck. I'm kidding. I've been around the block a lot with politics and passion and what we believe in. And I spent my whole life, even as a little girl, even standing up to some islanders here that treated me like I was nothing. You get off your journey with Lydia. So this has been a healing for me to say, this is not Lopez. You guys have all been welcoming, and we all have our passion about what we love. You love this place. And I think it begs to listen to what the people want. Because look at this world. Look at this world. I'm 70 years old, and my grandkids, I'm scared for them. Not just as Coast Salish people, but especially as Coast Salish people, but as human beings. Mm-hmm. I just went to Canada, another place I love, have a trailer up there, no running water, electricity, in a resort, fly fishing resort. And we had to turn around after 4 days because my husband's lungs almost collapsed from the smoke. That's human cause. We can say it's the heat, but why are we having all this global warming and different things? But it's people like you that need to stand up for what you love. That's why I'm here. I love Lopez. I love the San Juans. I know my history. I know where my bloodlines lie in marriages that took place from here all the way up to northern Vancouver, whether we wanted to be in love with somebody up there or not. Because back then it wasn't about love, it was about resources when you married. And so, or you were stolen, and one of my grandmothers was stolen from my father's side. And she ran away. She was around 13, 14, and it was a Hudson Bay trader that picked her up in Vancouver, somewhere in the woods, and making his way from Quebec to Colville, Cowlitz, to start Hudson Bay Trading Company that provided the food, the sheep to the San Juan Islands. And when all of that began, it was starting the Hudson Bay Company here, the whatever you call it, the fort. And so
she ended up marrying him, went there to Cowlitz, and then they had sons and they made their way back. And that's where my Goldman name comes from. So I'm not just Coast Salish, I'm many things, but those bloodlines are tied in there. I think why I'm here is because, and we have other tribes that voice it too, that are here or not. We appreciate the preservation that you do. Because even with the National Monument, Remo knows, she's probably heard of me. I love that there was a designation, that something would protect something. But I've seen in just my being on MRC and different things here in Lopez, Friday Harbor, everywhere. It's hard to keep the island life alive if you don't have economic development, money coming in, or taxes, or all those different things that make it. But with that, change comes. Good land use planning. You're partnering with the county to preserve, to take care of. If my husband were here and he's not native, he would say to you, take those buildings down. Don't tell her about them because she will fight to save them. Because I believe everything has life. And it tells us stories, especially if we as human beings have raised our babies and people have died and starved and diseased. We've all been there. And so to me, that's history. And far too soon, you'll have an oil refinery. Or you'll have, and I'm just warning you about, I don't even have to warn you. The San Juans depends on part of its economic development from tourism heavily. Tourism has changed this place since I was a little girl coming here fishing with my dad. And that's just growth. But how do you control that and preserve some natural places without the big guys coming in and buying, who have the money to buy big swaths of land? So be careful what you decide to do. That's my warning. From Tulalip Tribes, we appreciate that you've opened up your door, because the door has never really been open that much till the last 10 years for tribes to come in and listen to us. And some of us through sovereignty, and some of us, most of us through, we're all human beings at the end of the day. We bleed red, and we have spirits, we have children. But I was tasked to come and say a few things and what I thought we should do. But that's not what I'm saying. It's up to you. But listen to us and how we can help. And money-wise, I keep telling, and a lot of people don't like gaming money, but the negotiation with Washington State was that each tribe, in exchange for having those gaming facilities, would give a certain percentage of a tax base that would equal a tax base to Washington State. It's called, I can't remember it. No, it's a fund that every tribe has, and you have the right to apply to it. Any nonprofit to say, can we get $50 from this fund to better our community, whatever that form is. And you can look on Tulalip's website, and it's the charitable funds, that's what it is. And so I encourage, and maybe, and I don't know the stipulation, it has to be a more local tribe, look at those charitable funds to assist you financially. Because if it's restoration, make it a restoration ask. So that's just one thing. But Tulalip, I can only speak Tulalip from the heart of Harriet Shelton Dover. If you ever read her book, that was my granny. We're stronger together than we are apart. Billy Frank. Those was, excuse me, his last words to me the night before he died. He says, don't forget that, babe. And he says, the time for compromise is over for us as tribes, because there's not much left to this world left. We as human beings need to protect what we love the most in our communities. And the San Juan Islands are as much a part of me, even though I'm a visit here, as the breath I breathe. It's in my blood. I'm every coast sailor you could think I am, because we never married for love. We married for resources. To have a place to go to where the clams were better and the oysters and the salmon and the elk. But one of the greatest things, and Bree's heard us talk about this, and we've given our reports out, the impacts of recreation and tourism on our treaty rights. And Billy Frank said, when we win, you win. When we can save a tree, when we can save a bay, you win off the backs of our treaties. Because it's guaranteed that we'll always be able to go back there to these places to gather, hunt, fish, ceremonial purposes. And we need to work together to preserve that. I hear the heart cry of my brother over here, that what he's asking about for roads. We're working with the county on some of the roads for property that Toledo owns here at Lopez. But it was off our backs. We would have to give up everything to flood a place to, that's the only land we own off the reservation right now here in the San Juan Islands. And that's sacred to us because our people had always gone there for safe haven, all Coast Salish people. So it's a passionate thing. It's and I am sure many of the faces looking here, it's not for this generation. I might see anything else happen. It's for the next Lopesians, the next Coast Salish children that are coming here that either marry in or come to visit their homes and have access. It's for them. And this way of life of here has changed so much since I started coming and putting in my time the last 15, 20 years here. They assigned me. Today was a perfect example why I didn't want to do it. Because it takes away a half day of my life away from my family. I just get to the ferry. And now it's even worse, and then get home. And so the sense of urgency that you do the right thing is when you come together and do that right thing. And we can help. We need to help. We need to partner and engage. Not to take over, but because it's the right thing to do. Our ancestors are still here. We believe that. We know that. When I'm here, I feel them. And so today is just for me to listen and then go back and say, I'm not going to say what you told me to say. It's your family. You will live here. And you're at least somebody I can trust to take care of the interests of my 17. And so we've got 60% of our tribe is under the age of 18. We have 6,000 membership. So those future little kids might want to come here. My nephews, nieces and nephews and all my relations. So thank you. And I have a hard time finding this place too.
Madam Chair, thank you for letting your sister speak. Some of us here who have lived here for a long time, you cut off. You didn't cut the beautiful sister off. So just pointing that out.
You shouldn't. No.
No, you were great. Thank you.
So thank you, Patty. Thank you, everyone who provided your comments. And I want to remind you, you can fill out your postcard or you can send an email to Tanya. Do we have Tanya's email? You can send something to me and I'll forward it. But anyway, I really, really appreciate everybody's comments and that you all showed up. And so to remind you that we're going to have our monthly meeting next Friday over in Friday Harbor, and you can attend virtually. And again, there'll be a comment period at the end of it, maybe at the beginning too. At the beginning too, but that's a new piece of it. And then in October, we'll have our monthly meeting, and that's when we're going to make a decision. So if you have any comments, please try to get them to us by the 12th, because our meeting's on the 15th. Okay? And thank you, everybody.
I just want to give a shout out to all of you who volunteered your time to do this, and also for the paid staff for this there day after day. I'm so filled with appreciation for the land bank and what y'all do.
Yeah.
We're lucky. We're really lucky to have the land bank. That's what I say.
Any other counties have a land bank?
Nope.
We're the only one? Are we that brilliant, or why don't they have?
We are that brilliant.
Have it on the bottom of the
No
website.
question.